Welcome to the BIP Ventures Extraordinary Pursuits podcast, a fascinating and inspiring journey into the world of venture capital and startups. Each episode offers masterclasses and entrepreneurial stories from some of the top minds in the innovation economy. Get ready to unlock new ideas and gain valuable advice for how to thrive as an innovator and an investor. On this episode of Extraordinary Pursuits, we talk with Maija Ehlinger, the editor-in-chief of Hypepotamus, otherwise known as Hype, the leading innovation news publication in the Southeast. Maija's experience as a journalist covers companies of every size, but her work experience and her journalistic passion is for innovation companies. She's been at the helm of Hype for 3 years after spending almost 5 as a researcher and producer at CNN. Needless to say, Maija knows a thing or two about what makes a compelling story, especially in the innovation economy. On this episode, she shares what works, why a great story often hides behind timely announcements, and how entrepreneurs can have more luck getting more coverage. Let's get started. Maija, thank you so much for joining us. We are thrilled to have you.
Thanks so much. This is going to be a fun conversation, and I appreciate and honored to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. So let's start just very generally with an introduction of you. Tell us a little bit about your journey as a journalist, and in particular, a journalist in the innovation economy.
Absolutely. Well, I took a very different route to becoming a journalist, and it actually, from the very beginning, ties into entrepreneurship in a really interesting way. I went to Emory University for undergrad, and starting basically, I think the first month that I was on campus, I was part of an entrepreneurial pursuit of launching a student-run YouTube news channel. At the time, this was now 14 years ago. That was very innovative and new to have a news channel on YouTube. But that's where I really caught the bug, for journalism. How do you tell compelling stories? In this case, it was stories of what's happening on campus. But then also, how do you launch something in media? How do you create something new that wasn't there? So I was very lucky that it was not intentional, but from the very beginning, my entrepreneurial and journalism pursuits kind of were together, tied together. So after that, I actually ended up working in startups for some time. I had marketing roles in the e-commerce space, in the ed tech space, before finally making the pivot fully into journalism. So I feel like for me, being at Hype, being a business and technology reporter, covering startups is really a homecoming of sorts. I get to blend my love of journalism with the professional background I have in startups and the innovation economy.
Oh my gosh, you are a true unicorn. I think that is such a cool story. I mean, you're one of the original, content creators, I think, as they're called now, which is great. I won't call you an OG because you're not old enough to be an OG, but but I think it's really amazing when you have someone who has come into this space through kind of an entrepreneurial lens, because I would imagine that as a journalist, particularly with a publication that is so rooted and focused on, exposing what is really kind of at the front end of innovation, that you can approach it with a different kind of listening, a different kind of empathy, and maybe a little bit of a deeper, more nuanced understanding of, the startup community and the people who are in it. Are you, talk a little bit about your role at Hype and, how that experience, that empathy, that kind of listening ability sort of plays into your day to day.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as journalists, you are trained to be empathetic, and you're trained to listen and to understand who you're talking to. But you're also trained to, from the very beginning, whenever you're interviewing someone, journalists are told, and you're trained to know, you are not the expert. You are interviewing the expert. And so I think for me, that is particularly true with Hype. I'm talking to entrepreneurs that are building really impressive technologies in deep tech, in healthcare, in cybersecurity, in fintech. None of these things I know about. I will never be able to speak to a technical level with these founders, but my job is to distill what they're building and help people understand why what they're building is important for the overall innovation economy here in the Southeast. So for me, as a journalist at Hype, I am thinking constantly about, okay, we have incredible talent that's here in the Southeast. I want to be the person that shares the story of why this person, this founder, is the right person to be building this technology, and why this technology is being built in the Southeast, and what does that mean for us as a state, as a region, as we continue to build and grow our startup community.
That is amazing. You have that distinct opportunity to both be gifted with the chance to just learn constantly from people who are brilliant, beyond imagination, but also to be so incredibly valuable to them. And, that is something that I think we should spend some time talking about today is, we see so often with our early, especially our early stage founders, that there is a real need for the kind of exposure and storytelling and very sort of convincing storytelling in particular that you can do. This is why this technology is amazing. This is why this is the right founder. This is why happening here. All of those kinds of things are incredibly valuable to a young startup. And so very few of them really know how to harness it. So I would love to tap into your experience today to talk a little bit about what is PR and media, and how can entrepreneurs really harness it to help them as they are building their business. So I think let's just start with the basics. I mean, can you tell us a little bit about what is PR and how is it different from other forms of marketing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think in this conversation, we should kind of we can have three different buckets. You can have PR, you can have journalism and reporting, and marketing. And for me, the best way to think about these buckets, and the best way to distinguish them, is to think about who each person's customer is. When you're thinking about marketing, and I've had roles at startups as a marketing specialist or marketing operator. When you're in those roles, your job and your customer is your team. You are trying to get your product out to more people. You want eyeballs on the website. You want people hitting click and buy now on whatever that product might be. PR professionals are play a very important role in the media landscape. PR, public relations, for people who might not have heard the term. PR, their client is the startup or the company that they're working for. Their job is to come in and say, hey, I have this incredible client. I'm going to help them craft their narrative to get out there for new opportunities to get in front of people. There's many different ways that can happen. There's paid media, which is, you can put the money behind it and get the ads out there. And then there's earned media, and that's the kind of third bucket. And that's where journalists come in. And I think there's a common misconception that maybe there's a lot of overlap with PR and journalists. There is. I, first of all, know a lot of journalists who go into PR and vice versa. But I think the big distinction for people is to understand that journalists and PR people are different in who they serve, who are their target customers. Like I said, PR professionals are working for the company. As a journalist, I'm working for our readers. My job is to say, hey, these are the stories that you need to care about, not because this company, I want to, it's not about this is a company that you should be buying something from. It is this company is interesting and it fits into the general innovation economy in XYZ way. And this is how you need to know this story because it's going to impact the general business climate around us. So just to whenever you're thinking about the world of media, if it seems complicated, try to understand who every person's like target customer is at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a really, really well articulated sort of, deviation between the different ways of using, marketing and PR and media. And I think, in a world where so much is paid, um, because that's kind of how digital media has unfortunately kind of begun to work, and because it's a little bit more of a sure thing way to get coverage, it's very difficult for a resource strapped company to compete. So let's talk a little bit about the earned media piece, the part where you do have a journalist who's saying, on behalf of our readers, I want to tell a great story. I want to advocate for you through, a story that you've earned because you are doing amazing things. So, if you are an entrepreneur and you want to pitch the media, you think you've got a great story, whether it's your founder's story or it's a funding story or it's a product story, or, we'll talk a little bit about what some of those good categories are in a minute. But, if you are an entrepreneur trying to garner press, what are the kinds of details that you should be really prioritizing?
Yes, I think it comes down to from the very beginning, as you're looking to get that earned media, make sure you understand your purpose behind it, which I know sounds so rudimentary. You might think, oh, I know why I want press. Well, I think when you boil down to it, I don't think a lot of people spend enough time thinking about that. Because if you are reaching out to share a story just because you want to put it on your LinkedIn page, there's so many other ways that you can do this. But if you want to, earned media is a great way to put yourself as a thought leader in front of people. And so if you spend your time thinking about the purpose of why you're going out there, and perhaps you're saying, I've gone through the trenches as a founder, I have done X, Y, Z, and the seventh time that I tried Z, it worked, and you think, hey, that story could resonate, that's a great opportunity to become a thought leader and share those stories. So I would say, be intentional with the purpose of why you want to be out there. I think in our social media world, it's very easy to get clicks on what you want. But if you want to be part of a high quality conversation, make sure you're putting yourself out there in a way that will attract journalists, will attract media who want to say, hey, this person has a point of view and has some thoughts that should be shared with our wider audience.
That's really, really smart. So can you say a little more about that? I think, this idea of thought leadership is really, really important. And I think most people could probably look at something they're doing and think, okay, I could be a thought leader here or there, and, maybe want to jump straight to reaching out to the media to say, hey, you know what? I tried 9 times and number 10, it worked. And so I'd like to share this story, and I'm a thought leader. Say a little bit more about what a journalist might do in that case. Would you go and look at their LinkedIn, go and look at maybe if they have a personal blog, like, are they already creating content on that topic? I mean, how much does it matter that there's already sort of a presence of that story, established in the marketplace? Does that matter at all?
Absolutely. For me, as a business journalist, I am on LinkedIn more than I care to admit because I am constantly looking for what people are sharing and saying. Now, to be a thought leader, I absolutely do not think you have to have a blog or you have to be posting every day on LinkedIn. I'm sure my marketing colleagues and PR colleagues might have a different answer. But for me, I don't think that that's always necessary. I think, one of the things that's really important for when you think about how you can attract media attention is I think of it as, in two ways. The first way, which I know we'll get into, is the traditional writing a pitch, sending it to a journalist. The other way is to build relationships with reporters. And you have to remember as a reporter, I am constantly thinking, okay, what story is going to be most compelling for my audience today or tomorrow? What are people talking about? And so if you're able to, if tomorrow, God forbid, there's another big supply chain disaster in the world, as a business reporter, I am going to have to say, okay, I need the top 3 people I can think of off the top of my head that are supply chain and last mile transportation experts. And if I've built relationships with you over the years, you're probably going to be my first call. And those type of opportunities can be very big. It doesn't mean that you have a massive blog of your own and that's why I'm turning to you. It's authentic relationship building. And so I think that's a huge part of it. And you have to remember, it's not just networking with journalists. I often am cold asking people, hey, is anyone in your network a strong person to know? So don't feel like if you're saying, oh no, I don't know any journalists, what am I going to do? You build relationships with people in business community and people will find you as the thought expert.
Yeah. You sort of answered my tacit question there. How do you do that? And I think that you would probably agree. It's kind of everybody chuckles behind their hand and says, Atlanta is such a small town. Atlanta is a really small town. And so, I think whether you're in Atlanta or you're in Nashville or, some of these innovation hubs across the Southeast are really not giant cities. So, building those networks, is really valuable. I think you make a great point there. But say that someone wants to be a bit proactive and looks at you and says, okay, she definitely is someone I want to know. Is there a good way and is there a bad way to go about reaching out to you to say, hi, I just want to introduce myself. I don't have a story right now, but if I do, these are my areas of expertise. I mean, what does that ideal outreach look like?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, first of all, if I'm not interviewing people, I'm grabbing coffee with people all the time. For me, that's 2 reasons. I work in hyperlocal news. I want to be on the ground, the term in journalism, boots on the ground. You want to be in the community embedded. And for me, that's, I'm spending a lot of time getting coffee with people. It's part of my job to build that community support with people. So absolutely, for hyper-local journalists, that's what we want to do. Now, bigger newsrooms, that just might not be possible for people that aren't in the ground. But that's, if I can give some bias, that's why I love hyper-local news, because you are embedded in the community. So absolutely, if you don't have a story to tell right now, I still want to talk to you. Some of the best stories have been people who have said, hey, I'm just getting started. Let me tell you a little bit about my idea. Here's what I'm doing. And they're just giving little updates along the way. Some people will, add me to their investor email, and with the understanding, I'm not sharing that information out. You have to build trust in both ways. But to be able to say, as I said, some of the best stories come as we build relationships for 6 months, a year, 2 years before someone says, hey, this is the right time to tell the story. And I want Hype to be the one to share it. So don't be afraid to reach out. I think another great way to reach out to journalists is I I should have done it this morning, but Google Trends. If you look at Google Trends and you say, okay, the big news of the day is XYZ. It's Wall Street stock prices. It's I'm trying to the war, ongoing war in the Middle East, and summer ticket prices. Let's say your startup has something to do with one of those, and you say, hey, I just want to reach out and say, if you're working on a story about this because it's in the news, I'd love to chat with you. I read those emails all the time, happy to. And oftentimes there are people who just want to share a unique point of view that they have on something that's going on in the world and how it relates to the innovation economy here.
That is brilliant. That sort of proactivity and understanding that, there is a way in which, you know, they're not necessarily asking you for coverage, but they're providing you with resources to make your job easier and to make your story more successful. Is what I'm hearing, and I think that if that's true, that's great. That should give people a lot of confidence.
Absolutely. I think, being proactive and reaching out will always be a good thing. And, not just me, but if you're talking to a journalist and, ask them what stories they're working on, because they might be saying, hey, I'm working on, I'm trying to understand the cybersecurity world better. You say, hey, I've got this is what I work on. It's niche, but I'd love to talk to you about it. You have to remember, we're working on tight deadlines. We're working on putting out the best stories. We're reading what other people are putting out there and competing, for lack of a better word, with others. So we want to put out the best story. And so if anyone can help us do that, it's a win-win all around.
So, can we just pause on this idea of helping with the stories just for a moment? Because I know that a lot of publications have an editorial calendar that is built, usually a year in advance. Unfortunately, I think with a lot of the really big ones, it tends to be more pay to play and placement that way. But as a hyper local journalist, do you maintain an editorial calendar, and is that something that is a useful resource for entrepreneurs to consult so they know maybe a few months out, that you're going to be talking about something that they could be, contributing to?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think for us, editorial calendars have been more of a guideline. We are, of course, the reality is we cover startups. The startup world changes so quickly. A great example, last year, if you would have told me, oh, do you have writing about startup banks on your editorial calendar? Absolutely not.
No.
So I think for us as a hyperlocal paper, and we do not do any sort of pay to play, we use it as a guideline. I think for us, if you're up on our site now, you'll probably start realizing more and more we're doing, instead of an editorial calendar, we're doing columns. We're doing a get to know the CEO series. We're doing a temperature check column, diving into one trend in the ecosystem. So for us, those columns are going to be our bread and butter. And so those are a great way for someone to reach out and say, hey, I've had really great people reach out saying, hey, I've read these get to know the CEO series. I'd love to nominate someone who would be a great fit for it. But in general, when you think about editorial calendars, the main thing that I would say to people is every paper, every publication, every news channel around the world is going to want to write about things that are topical and happening then. So months in advance that Christmas and the holiday season are coming. You bet we're going to be writing about last mile logistics a couple weeks before. Valentine's Day. This might not be right for Hype, but other publications are going to be wanting to write about dinner places to go. So start thinking about the best thing is look at what headlines are out there right now or around a seasonal topic. And you bet journalists are saying, how can I write about that topic too?
Yeah. And how much runway does that journalist tend to need? If you're thinking about, February, Valentine's Day, places to eat for Valentine's Day, for example, you probably wouldn't want to pitch that the last week of January. What kind of a time frame do journalists typically need to work on so that they can get through the information gathering and writing and editing and all of those processes that you have to go through?
Absolutely. Every person is going to have their own way of looking at it. And, I would say the more advanced time you can give, the better. The reason is there will always be a story that pops up the day before that is going to take our time and energy away. There's always going to be a breaking news story, a funding story that is going to take my attention away. So with the Valentine's Day example, or, for any holiday example, I'm going to try to get those standalone pieces that I know I can, I can get in really get some great sources and spend some time digging into. If I have a month before to get that all planned out, that's the time to be reaching out to me, because yeah, exactly. If it's a week before, I can't promise it's going to be in there. An important thing to remember too is journalists love to work under embargoes. And for people who might not have heard about these, embargoes are where you give news to a journalist confidentially and say, hey, I'm giving you this information, but it can't go out to the press. It can't go out to the public until this time at this date. Now, for us, we love working with embargoes, and we will always, we will respect the embargo. There's a understanding, and very much it's all about trust with embargoes. And so when you're working with different news outlets, I know that can be scary. Some people might not want that. For us, it's a way to ensure that we can do a story justice. A lot of times people will say, hey, we have this great story, and they give it to me at 9:00 at night. Okay, well, they want me to publish it the next morning. I'm not going to be able to do my best work on it. But if you say, hey, I have this really cool story, we're hiring this incredible new CEO, but we can't make it official until next week, but here's the information so you can write it and do the story justice. Oh, believe me, if you give, if you work with a journalist under embargo, they're going to love you.
That is, I hope that the founders who are listening to this press pause and rewind and listen to that again, because, you've just given, a really, really valuable few pieces of advice. I think the embargo piece is just incredibly smart. And, with so many startups, whether it's new products they're working on or a really important new hire or funding, these are things that take a lot of time. So there is zero excuse not to sort of integrate this idea of like, how do we get this story out and, give you enough time, give the journalist enough time to do that story justice and work with them as a partner. The other thing I heard you say, though, that I think is really a valuable counterpoint to that is the part about monitoring Google Trends and knowing how to contribute in a very timely manner. And so, when we talk about content, we often with our founders and in-house at BIP Ventures, we often talk about, is this timely or is this timeless? And, timeless tends to be a little bit more evergreen. It might be more of that thought leadership. Some of the timely stuff, I don't want to call it newsjacking, but it is like, hey, I can participate in this conversation. So I think your point about knowing when and how they can best contribute is kind of a factor for success.
Absolutely. I love that timely versus timeless. I might start using that. But yes, in the world of news, things happen very quickly. And
Yeah.
so if you can help a journalist out, it's going to really, we'll really thank you for that.
Yeah, no, that's great. So as we're sort of approaching the end of our time together, which I can't believe we're almost at the end of our time together, I really would love for you to share with us, is there anything that you don't get asked that you wish people would ask you?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I don't get asked enough is something a timely story, or is something really a story? I understand when you are in startups and you have a new product or a new tweak or something new in your algorithm, or whatever it might be, it seems like the biggest deal, and it is to your company, and that's wonderful. It might not warrant a full 600-word article. That does not mean it's not important. It does not mean that we don't care about it. It just means it might not be the story of the week. It just might not fit. And so I would say don't be discouraged if we don't take it, or if a journalist doesn't take it as a full story. And that piece of news, that piece of information might do really well as part of a larger story. It might not be the story, but let us use our editorial judgment to say, hey, this is a good piece of information. Maybe I'm working on a bigger story that would fit into, and we're going to include it there. Or, maybe we'll pass on it this time, but let's keep the conversation going. Or, if we do decide it's a full blown story, let's work together on making it great. So I think I don't get asked that enough. I think a lot of people, just say, hey, write this story. This is great. If it's not ready to be a full-blown story, doesn't mean it's not exciting news. It doesn't mean that, we have our own editorial decisions we have to make on the back end as well.
Yeah, of course, that makes perfect sense. And so I think, just following on that a bit, are there specific details when someone sends you information for a story that, are really very helpful to you? Anything that, someone should know about like sending you that pitch?
Absolutely. And I'll make this as universal for any time you're pitching to any journalist. Number one, make sure that the pitch that you are writing is hyper curated to who you are writing to. I get hundreds of pitches that are clearly sent out to 100 journalists. It's not going to be interesting or compelling. Make sure within the headline you are saying that you are a startup, where you are based, and what you are doing, because we are quickly going through pitches after pitches. And if I have to search and say, is this company in Atlanta? Is this company a seed stage company? Just put it in the very basic terms. Avoid the superlatives and just get to the point. Say, this company is doing this. It has raised this amount, and give the ask. We want you to talk to our founder. I think too many times pitches are wishy-washy. They don't have an ask, which is amazing because you are pitching. So give the ask, and make sure it's tied into an understanding of trends that are going on, or an understanding that what the journalist does. I am not the New York Times. I don't work for the New York Times. We have a very different audience. So if you have to write the pitch to the journalists you're working for and know their beat, what they're covering, and why they should care. It sounds simple, but I promise you, spend some time curating every pitch you send out, and you will get much better response rates than just sending it out cold.
Yeah, yeah. So what I hear you saying a little bit is that email pitch is not going to be the content that ends up in a story. It's going to be the thing that gets a conversation with you that potentially gets content into a story.
Absolutely. And yes, sending over, this is how I see a lot of times people saying, this is the story that you should write. I promise you it's probably going to be a little different when we consider who our audience is. A pitch should be an opening to say, this is why we're relevant to you.
Yeah.
Period. The end. Let's talk.
Yep. Brilliant. That's brilliant. And you're right. It is a pitch. So, keeping that in mind. That's awesome. Okay. So before we close, I just have two last quick questions. One is just, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you want to sort of go on record as an innovation economy journalist? Anything you want founders or the innovation economy to know?
I would just say, I feel as though it's part of my passion and my interest in dispelling and demystifying what the media is and isn't. So if you have any questions, I've been in startup shoes. I understand that people might be scared of talking to journalists, might not understand what talking to journalists means. As a hyperlocal reporter, if I can dispel any myths or concerns you have, please talk to me. I think there's a lot of confusion about what a journalist is and what it isn't. I consider myself hopefully to be someone who within the Atlanta and Southeast community can, if I can help change your perception on anything, I'm here to be a resource and to chat more.
That's incredibly generous. And I think you have done that in a multitude of ways today. So we're very grateful for your time and your honesty and your experience. It has been a pleasure having you. And, where can people find you?
Absolutely. Well, I hope everyone, shameless plug, please subscribe to Hypepotamus. We have a newsletter, completely free, no paywall. And the reason is we want to share the story of the innovation economy and be part of the community. So please connect with me there. Also, I'm on LinkedIn. Hypepotamus is on LinkedIn. And I promise you I'm the only Maija Ehlinger with my spelling. So I'll be pretty easy to find. But please connect, and you'll see that I'm quite often putting out feelers into the community, what I'm looking for, especially on LinkedIn. So if you connect with me there and follow Hype, you'll get a sense of what I'm looking for as well for upcoming Hype stories. And hopefully, you can find something that you can pitch me.
Awesome. Well, I cannot second all of that more. Hype is a must read in my inbox. And I mean, the minute it comes in, I open it up, and it's one of maybe 2 or 3 newsletters that I would say that about. It is definitely the pulse of the innovation economy in the Southeast. And your LinkedIn presence is incredibly dynamic. So thank you for sharing all of that. And again, thank you for being with us, Maija. We have appreciated you so much.
Thanks. This has been such a fun conversation. So appreciate the time.
Thanks for listening to the BIP Ventures Extraordinary Pursuits podcast. Check the show notes on our blog for the resources we discussed. You can find Extraordinary Pursuits on your favorite audio platform. Be sure to subscribe to the BIP Ventures YouTube channel and connect with us on LinkedIn, X, and Instagram so you get all the stories, learnings, and ideas for ways to thrive in the innovation economy. And if you liked this episode, be generous. Share it.